You were against same-sex marriage, now you're for it. You defended President Obama's immigration policies, now you say they're too harsh. You supported his trade deal dozens of times. You even called it the gold standard. Now, suddenly last week, you're against it. Will you say anything to get elected?
Well, actually, I have been very consistent over the course of my entire life.
But look at those hands. Are they small hands? And he referred to my hands. If they're small, something else must be small. I guarantee you there's no problem. I guarantee it.
Well, wait a minute. Yeah. I have a question for you.
Yeah.
Would you agree that the Trump versus Clinton major party candidacies presented as the only viable political alternatives to the American people by the establishment media, that this is an insult to the intelligence and the basic decency of the American people?
Not only do I agree with that statement, I think most Americans agree with that statement, in that 60% support a third-party candidate. 60% of Americans want to
support the idea,
want to see a third-party candidate. And
yes.
Over 75% of Americans, and this is through polling, national polling, would like to see the debates opened up to the additional parties.
So how do we get these people who realize that there should be third-party candidates to actually endorse and vote for third-party candidates?
Right, and I guess isn't that what we're talking about?
That's
today?
our problem today. My own view is that a vote for Hillary Clinton or a vote for Donald Trump is intrinsically unsafe. You're talking about two warlords, okay? You're talking about two people, both of whom are likely to engage in irresponsible overseas adventures, primarily for domestic political purposes, or because their major campaign contributors have a lot of money to make in the wars that they will create.
Absolutely.
I mean, these are not safe votes, you know? Do you vote out of fear, or do you vote for the things you actually believe in?
Right.
And Jill Stein has said, you know, vote for the greater good, not for the lesser of two evils. Sounds like a good idea to me.
Right. And, you know, despite the fears of a Trump presidency, a big fear of mine, I think, is that we continue to do nothing to combat global climate change. And with heavy financial backers like ExxonMobil behind Hillary Clinton and the Democratic establishment, we cannot count on anything happening because nothing has happened. You look at the past Democratic administrations, including Obama, including Clinton, virtually nothing has happened to progress global climate change policies, or for that matter, to limit income inequality, which has been growing, largely as a result of policies undertaken by Bill Clinton. So, you know, there's some dire policy issues that need to be focused on, and whether it's Trump or Hillary, they're not going to happen.
What does it mean to be working class? Is that something from out of the past? And do we always gotta come in last? That's the question I'm gonna ask. What does it mean to be working class?
Let's be clear. If you are making less than about $1 million in take-home pay per year, neither Hillary Clinton nor Donald Trump represent any of your interests. There are people who we would have to say are in the 1% of wealth and income in this country, and Hillary doesn't represent them either.
Yeah.
Hillary only represents the big donor class. Okay, in terms of climate change that you were just referring to, Owen, Hillary's approach to climate change is typical of the whole Democratic Party approach, which is to placate progressive sentiments with either tokens or partial policies, while going full bore ahead attacking the environment in this case, attacking working class income, attacking working class security.
Yeah.
And by working class, I'm talking about, I mean, look, even most doctors and lawyers are in a position at this point in time, and people who have successful small businesses where, you know, in many respects, their interests are not entirely different from what we used to think of as the old-fashioned working class.
Yeah.
You know, like the blue-collar working class and so
Right.
on. Most white-collar people in this country are being run down one way or another, you know, and Hillary, for instance, what she wants to do with the environment is have a lot of solar panels installed, and that's great. I have solar panels on my house,
And she still supports
very
fracking.
efficient. It's very efficient. But yeah, let's install solar panels, but let's frack like crazy.
Yeah.
Well, so on the one hand, you're reducing the carbon footprint one place, but in another place, you're increasing it.
Right.
So, you know, she's just placating the environmentalists with the idea that let's have a whole bunch of solar panels. No, let's leave the oil in the ground.
Yeah.
Let's leave the oil in the ground. Future generations need oil. They need oil for petrochemicals and medicine. They need it for plastics. Oil is not bad. Oil is actually good. We need it for the future. Future generations need it. This idea that we should take every last ounce out of it because we can do it cheaply is crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy, and it also is terrible for the environment. The carbon footprint is extremely high. So
And
Hillary's approach there is essentially morally bankrupt.
Yeah. So two things. So to the point of doctors, lawyers being in the working class,
Or having interests that are increasingly aligned
Right.
with what I would call the working class.
I would quote Professor Louis. Look him up online. You'll find him, a great street poet of New York, who does a song called "What Does It Mean to Be Working Class?" And he talks about, well, we talk about middle class. Today we say we're middle class this, middle class that, but we're really essentially in that mode of where we're all working class. The 99% is working class, and our power is continually stripped away from us, economically and politically. And you see that, you know, in the workplace, benefits, unionization, and increasingly lower wages for younger workers are part of what's happening. But to the second point you were bringing up is, what can be done for climate change? We're not going to get there by fracking and other things. And I think that gets to why Jill Stein. So why vote for Jill Stein? I don't think we've gotten fully there yet. But, her plan includes a Green New Deal. Look it up on jill2016.com. Okay? After you're done looking up Professor Louis. Our Power to the People plan includes a Green New Deal, create 20 million jobs, and prevent climate meltdown. This is something that has not happened under Democratic or Republican.
And this is not unrealistic because the number of jobs in the state of Connecticut that are related to solar power is now getting to be a reasonably large number. And if we, in a committed way, move from fossil fuels to solar power, the system is really, we're in a position where we're actually ready to make a kind of inflection in the transition to solar power. With the right kind of support, instead of being something like 5% of households or whatever in Connecticut, we could have 50% or more of households in Connecticut with solar installation. That's a revolutionary development. Then you're talking about not needing fossil fuels.
Right.
You're in a position where we can really leave it in the ground.
And cutting the military spending by 50% to be reinvested elsewhere in really positive change and jobs that will help us to end climate change.
Jill's only looking for a 50% reduction? Oh, gee.
Yeah.
We got to talk to her about that. No, it could obviously be a lot more. The United States could cut its military budget by 50%, and it would still be spending more than the next 4 or 5 countries
Right.
combined.
So we're well over a
Oh,
trillion.
it's crazy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
But and then Medicare for all. Most Americans would like to see that, a single-payer healthcare plan, make healthcare a human right.
I think people have to ask themselves, does their current healthcare coverage leave them with a feeling of security about the future? Or is the very system that we deliver healthcare by and the system by which we pay for it, isn't this actually a source of worry? Is that healthy? I've lived overseas. I've lived in countries where there's universal health care guaranteed by the government. Okay, in those countries, health is no longer worried about.
Right.
People don't have to obsessively check, oh, am I covered this, am I covered for that, or whatever. There are all sorts of systems. There's the German system, there's the British system, there's the Canadian system. What they all have in common is the fact that they recognize that health care is a right.
Absolutely.
It's a basic human right. So much so that if you go to these countries, many of them, and you get sick, they're going to treat you before they ask about your American insurance or anything else. You're simply going to be treated, okay? And maybe they may go for your American insurance, right? But healthcare is a right. It has to be provided as efficiently as possible.
The class war is always on. It has been here since the day you were born. We just need to know whose side we're on.
Class war.
Class war, the rancid rhetoric of class warfare.
Are you engaging in class war?
You know, here's the thing. You know what Robert Reich said, and Robert Reich may be backing Hillary right now, but boy, that guy is really an insightful fellow.
He is. Yeah.
He and many other people have pointed out that we're not initiating class war. Class war is something that the 1% does to the 99%. They bring it to us.
Right.
It's a question of whether we're willing to acknowledge it, organize, and fight back.
The class war is always on, whether you know it or not.
You're either on the diners list or you're on the menu.
Yep.
Okay, and for a long time now, the American working people, the 99%, have been on the menu. Now, it doesn't make any difference whether Hillary wins the election or Trump wins the election. Now, that's an extreme statement. Of course, it's going to make some differences, okay? But if your political sentiments are progressive, or what we call on the left, in other words, if you're somebody who's angry, and instead of blaming people next door to you who are maybe of a different sexuality, or are immigrants, or have a different skin tone than you, if instead of blaming your comrade and your brother next to you, and sister next to you, you actually are starting to look for the fact that maybe the way that things are organized at the top is the problem. You know, there's an old Sicilian saying that the fish stinks from the head. Okay, you want to know where social problems come from. Look at the people who've got all the advantages. Look at the people who are really organizing the thing. Okay, so whether Hillary wins or Trump wins, the 1% is still going to be in control. Okay. The flavor is going to be a little different, but the underlying substance is going to be the same.
Exactly.
So the real issue here is, okay, we're supporting Jill Stein in the election. It's not a protest vote. It's a vote of hope. Okay, if you want to engage in a vote of desperation, okay, you can have it. You can vote for Hillary or even Trump.
So the class war is on. It's just, whose side are you on? Are you really going to be on the side of your own interests, of really 99% of people in this country, or are you going to stay with the safer vote of Hillary? Now, Hillary is going to win this election, I think. So we'll look back on this and say, well, at least we tried for Jill Stein. But you can still make a difference by voting for Jill Stein. You can still help the third-party candidacy win federal matching funds if she gets over 5% of the vote. You can help Green Party candidates to get on the ballot. In Connecticut, Hillary's currently up by 15%, I've seen. So it's a pretty safe thing to vote for the Greens here. California, she's up by 25%. So it's a very safe thing to vote for Greens. And it will make a big difference, even if they don't win the election this time. Well, let's be real, it's not going to happen. But we need to build a movement for the future. And part of that is harnessing all of the power. And there was a lot of power, not only in Bernie's movement, but in Occupy before that, and it grew.
The Bernie movement was
Bernie.
remarkable, and
Yeah.
you know, a survey of Bernie's delegates at the convention has been done, and it indicates that the great majority of them are not supporting Hillary Clinton.
Right.
The great majority of Bernie Sanders supporters, and that's millions of people, are not actually supporting Hillary Clinton, and actually, they're not even really intending to vote for Hillary, or if they do, it is a true vote of despair.
So do you think there's still some people who are holding on hope that something might happen and Bernie might still be the candidate?
I think there are, but I don't think it's going to happen. Look, the thing about Bernie Sanders is he told us from the beginning that if he would jump into the Democratic primaries as a Democrat, that he felt that it was beholden on
Right.
him, not just
To
institutionally,
support.
but morally,
Yeah.
to support whoever the candidate was. And so if someone does what they've already told you that they're inevitably gonna do, you don't get upset about it, okay?
Yeah, yeah.
So it was a good run, it was more successful than I think almost anybody, including Bernie himself, thought it was
Amazing.
gonna be. We actually had real issues being talked about in an American election.
Right,
The first election I remember since 1972,
right,
the
right.
McGovern versus
And he
Nixon
was
election.
baited into talking about the emails. He said, I don't want to talk about the emails. And he brought
Probably a
up
mistake.
a mistake, you know, in tactics,
Yeah.
but not a mistake morally. Because he focused on things that we haven't talked about. That the number one threat that we have is global climate change. It's not the Russians or the Middle East or terrorism. It's global climate change.
In the previous debate, you said the greatest threat to national security was climate change. Do you still believe that?
Absolutely. In fact, climate change is directly related to the growth of terrorism. And if we do not get our act together and listen to what the scientists say, you're going to see countries all over the world. This is what the CIA says. They're going to be struggling over limited amounts of water, limited amounts of land to grow their crops. And you're going to see all kinds of international conflict.
He also brought up Indian, Native American rights. I've never heard that as part of a campaign.
Bernie was so right on, and he was so progressive, and he was so constructive in the issues that he focused on, that he was like a laser through all of the baloney and the bullshit and so on. It was a remarkable campaign.
Amazing.
Okay.
And he affected millennials. Millennials are the future. 43% of them are all right with the idea of a socialist party. So, you know, Jill Stein is as close as we're going to get in this election. And, you know, socialism is not anathema to this next generation. And in fact, they recognize that a lot of the gains in quality of life throughout the world are through policies that are considered socialist. And
What is
believe it or
socialism?
not, there are socialist policies here that a lot of people love, like roads, police, military, schools, you know, Air Force, post office. You know, these are all things that
Socialism is the
that we
openness
publicly
to
fund.
using the government for the benefit of the 99% instead of the 1%.
Yeah.
Okay, if you become a libertarian, and I hope nobody here becomes a libertarian, you basically sold yourself out to a 1% philosophy that says that the government shouldn't do anything for the people. Well, if the government isn't working for the people, guess who it's working for? It's working for the Koch brothers.
Right.
Okay, and behind Gary Johnson's, and Gary Johnson has some positive points, but behind Gary Johnson is the Koch brothers financial network.
Yep.
That's his primary support and so on. Okay, people are misguided to support that, but look, looks like 80% likelihood and higher than that Hillary's going to win. But if Hillary wins or Trump wins, we're here in January 2017 with another oligarch in power, with an oligarch who has worse political sentiments and worse political understandings than Barack Obama had. Look, main thing Barack Obama did is a lot of the really bad stuff he just didn't get on board with. I mean, the guy has some decency. I mean, and I'm not a big supporter of it, but there's something decent about the guy at some basic level. There isn't for either Hillary or Trump. They're totally in bed with all the big money, and they both like the idea of saber rattling and going to war as a way of distracting from the fact that they're incredibly unpopular. So if either one of them, and it looks like it's going to be either one of them, gets into power, what's going to happen is, you know, Supreme Court isn't going to be filled, you know, we're not going to have this policy, we're going to have more crippled government, worse than Obama, okay, because they're both more unpopular than Obama. So there's going to be no consensus here for governing anything, and it's going to be very, very tempting to do what George W. Bush did when he came into power and the economy was sagging and he had no consensus and everybody knew in their hearts that he had actually stolen the election from Al Gore. Okay? And what happened? Oh, well, how do you distract a vulnerable people from what's going on? You start another big war. Okay? There's going to be a huge temptation for either Hillary or Trump to start another big war. The big war that they're talking about starts in Syria, but it involves almost direct, immediate military confrontation with a very powerful country, Russia, that we have no business having a war with. Okay? And another very powerful country, China. the Chinese and the Russians are not going to go down to the Americans alone. Okay, they're very committed to the fact that the United States starts to get highly aggressive with either one, the other one will come in and give assistance. Hillary's recent rhetoric about what's really, if you take a look at it, she literally is saying, I'll consider using nuclear weapons if the Russians use cyber warfare on the United States.
Oh my God.
What?
So, when you come down to it, yeah, it's a matter of worldview, of overarching philosophy, and that is, I think, to what you're speaking to now. Is it a competition of all against all, of each for his own, of dog eat dog, or are we all in this together? I mean, every major...
Dog eat dog as individuals and also as nations.
And dogs.
Yeah, and dogs. Nations of dogs. Yes.
Yeah. So, or are we all in this together? I mean, every major religious tenet that Americans hold dear, whether you're Christian, Jewish, Muslim, has beliefs that we should support each other and that we are a community and that it's everyone in the human race. And if you believe in that kind of thing, that we are a species that is evolving, well then certainly we can evolve towards a higher spirited way of interacting with each other. That doesn't mean that we have to compete and that we don't have to kill each other, because we're not going to tackle things like global climate change unless we do cooperate. And this is a whole new paradigm that we need to get to, that is already, in place in many parts of the world, and in many smaller examples of communities, where you don't have to necessarily compete against everyone else in a dog-eat-dog way.
But we're going to have to struggle to get there.
Yeah.
Okay, we're going to have to struggle to get there because January is going to come.
Yeah.
And we're trying to advocate to you to please cast a vote of hope, okay,
Yeah.
and a vote of wisdom for Jill Stein, okay?
And
So
enlightenment,
that, and
evolution.
so that people understand that there's at least some reasonable body of people out here who are not going to buy into that crazy old lesser of two evil thing. But in all likelihood now, we're going to end up in January, one of these two warhawk oligarchs is going to get installed. And whoever it is, whether it's Trump or it's Clinton, their political instincts are worse than Barack Obama, and they're much more dedicated to forcing people, both of them, to forcing people to do what it is that they want than Barack Obama, because Barack Obama's kind of a laissez-faire guy in a lot of ways. Okay, you can look at that positively or negatively. But there's going to be a lot more push. And these people are much more beholden to the big interests and so on. So there's going to be, you're going to hear engines revving up in January, unless we, the people, are ready to go and oppose all the deviltry that Hillary and or Trump are going to be starting. But we're looking at a bad turn in this country's history. Okay, a really bad election with really unpopular candidates after having actually been shown what real progressive policies could be with Bernie Sanders. We've been cast down into this pit of this miasm of despair, okay? Bad election, going to be a bad outcome of the election in all likelihood. We're going to have to protest if we want to survive.
So get out there, protest, vote for Jill Stein, go to jill2016.com, and be aware of the fact that there is a lot of progressive politics around us going on in Connecticut.
Vote for Jill Stein, step one, okay? Get ready to oppose the terrible government that's coming in inevitably, okay, in January, step two, okay? We're going to be talking about step 2 and also 3 and 4 as they evolve.
Okay.